Hi, Eric Foley talking about transformational giving. One of the first questions that you may have when you decide to make the transition from traditional transactional fundraising, which is a fancy way of saying the way that fundraising has been done for the last 50 years, to transformational giving, which is the biblical method of employing everything that the Bible teaches about growing champions in Christ, is this: what kind of a database do I need to be able to use to do that? It's a great question because it becomes pretty apparent pretty quickly that the way that databases are built is really for the old system. And that's absolutely true. That's the good news and bad news about the question about which database to use. Let me give you the bad news first. The bad news is that there is no such thing as a transformational giving database that you can buy off the shelf today. In fact, there's not even really such a thing as a transformational giving database that somebody paid money to build. Always, databases are about one generation behind the development strategies that give birth to them. So it won't be for another 4 or 5 years that we see a transformational giving database. But here's the good news. The good news is that I developed transformational giving on an Excel spreadsheet. And what that means is, it doesn't matter what database you have today, I'm confident that by watching this series of videos, you can learn how to use that database transformationally by keeping track of a different kind of data. Turns out most ministries don't have a database problem. They have a data problem. And by data, what I mean isn't just that their data is out of date. That's often true. But I mean something deeper. What I mean is that they're tracking the wrong kind of data. There's something more that needs to be tracked. In order to get a handle on what that is, it's not this that we turn to, but this. The Bible actually is a really great practical document in terms of understanding how data is used in human transformation. From the Old Testament to the New Testament, there are tons of scriptures. Psalm 139, Lord, you know everything about me, from my rising to my laying down. Jesus in the Gospel of Luke says, not a hair can fall from your head, but that God notices. In Chronicles, it talks about how God keeps track of everything in our lives. Well, God's not doing it on a database that we are in the same way of developing a donor record and so forth. But there's a lot of things we can learn from how God keeps track of data. The most important thing we can learn is what data God is keeping track of. And the second most important thing we can learn is what's the purpose for which God is gathering this data. You know, a lot of times we as Christians think that God gathers data to use it for our condemnation. But the truth is that God gathers data for our transformation. It's not just that he gathers it about us, it's that he shares it with us. And throughout the Bible, all throughout each of the books of the Bible, you hear God calling his people to remember and to rehearse what he's done. The best vision I can give you of what a transformational giving database will look like in the future is Facebook. I know it sounds strange because it sounds a lot different than the databases that you're used to. But think of Facebook as a good example of what data is going to be because it's shared between an individual and their sphere of influence. And it talks about the things that are important to the individual, and the individual is, of course, instrumental in its creation. That's where we're going to with databases. And so in the meantime, between now and the time that that first transformational giving database appears, what we're going to need to do is to learn how to use our existing traditional transformational databases to keep track of transformational data. In this series, we're going to be laying out everything that you need to know to take your existing database without spending any more money and to be able to use it for transformational giving by changing the kind of data that you're tracking, by changing why you're tracking data, and by making it an exercise that you do with your champions, not about them. By the end of the series, you'll realize something that's deep about databases, and that's this. Your whole development program is really about building a database with your champions. I know that sounds really different than everything you've heard, because typically we think of our database as supporting our development work, but it's not. I'm going to explain to you in these upcoming videos how it is that by working together with your champions to create database pages that they help you to update and review, and that they're excited about being a part of building with you, you can create a development program that really does glorify God transformationally, moving away from transactional fundraising to transformational giving.